All right, good evening, everybody. I am Ross Kaminsky, and ignore what you heard 10 seconds ago. This is, in fact, the second Ready Colorado town hall with leading Republican gubernatorial candidates, and my special guest in studio, just on my left, is businessman and one-time Colorado State legislator Victor Mitchell. Vic, good evening. Thanks so much for being here. Pleasure to see you, and looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, Ross, it's great to be here, and it's great to be back on 630 KHOW, and looking forward to talking about school choice and having a great night with you tonight. And what a great opportunity to share our message in Colorado. So many people are suffering when it comes to school choice and have limited options, so it's going to be an exciting night.
Yeah, we're going to have a tremendous range of topics tonight, including plenty on education. But I'd like to give you the opportunity to start with just give us maybe 1 minute on who is Victor Mitchell and why is he running for governor?
Absolutely. Well, my name is Victor Mitchell. I'm a candidate for governor, and I have a little bit of an interesting background. I was, at the age of 11, I left my two older sisters and my father behind to take care of my mother, who's a single mother and 90% blind and deaf. So I took care of her from the age of 11 on. I started working at 13. I started my first business when I was 21. I've actually never worked for anyone other than myself. I built 6 successful companies, most of them here in Colorado. And that type of thinking, that type of executive leadership, that type of being a disruptor and an innovator is exactly what we need. We have many challenging reforms that need to be implemented. As far as why I'm running, you can be angry or you can be frustrated or you can be disillusioned or you can be part of the solution. I choose to be part of the solution. We have had a tremendous loss of confidence and trust in our institutions and our elected officials. I hope to make a difference.
And for those of you joining us on the phones, and perhaps those of you who don't know me, I should have introduced myself. I'm Ross Kaminsky, the host of the very cleverly named Ross Kaminsky Show mornings here on KHOW. And I want to remind you, and I will remind you frequently as we go through the conversation with Victor Mitchell, that if you want to ask a question and participate in the conversation with Victor, hit *3 on your phones, *3 to ask a question. We're also going to open up our phone lines here at KHOW at 303-713-TALK for folks who want to ask questions the good old-fashioned radio way. And I am going to bring callers on whenever we get good questions that fit into the topic that we're talking about at the time. So if you have a question that's about something else, we'll do our very best to get to you, but just wait until we get to that part of the topic. Let's jump in. You actually started right off the top talking about school choice. Obviously, an enormous issue here in the state of Colorado, and one big aspect of it is charter schools. And I wanted to get your take on charter schools, and in particular on the aspect of charter schools. We'll start off with this at least. The way charter schools get approved basically requires the permission of the school district, which in a way gives teachers' unions a monopoly of what schools can be opened that present competition to the teachers' unions. So what do you think about this? What do you think about charter schools overall and their role in the state of Colorado? And should school districts be able to stop charter schools from opening?
So the answer is absolutely. We need to do a lot more and make it much more accessible for anyone to open a charter school that's obviously qualified and can actually make a difference and has a niche that they could service. Charter schools have been overwhelmingly effective here in Colorado, and I've done more for school choice and to improve performance in many different aspects. Actually, most teachers that teach today in charter schools, actually all teachers in Colorado, that are not part of the union at all. So you're absolutely right. We have this charter institute, so the union has a tremendous amount of power and control, unfortunately, over our education process. They're not putting our kids and our parents first. And you're exactly right. In order to get a charter, you have to go directly to the school district. You have to get approval. If they don't approve it, then the other option is to go to the Charter Institute. But that then requires also, again, the unions through the school board have to approve that as well. So I think there needs to be, it's kind of the fox in the hen house. We need to make it much easier for charters to open. And we need to promote school choice in every form. I mean, there's never been more opportunities to do more in school choice than today, especially with the online curriculum, and the content of that curriculum is tremendous. You can really educate people in a whole range of different topics and subject matters anywhere in our state, anywhere in the country for that matter.
So you used the phrase school choice in any form. One relatively new form that is sprouting up in a few places around the country is something called an education savings account, ESAs. There have been a lot of stories about them in Arizona. Nevada has quite a good program as well. And it's a program where the state places education money into an account controlled by parents. It can be used for tutors. It can be used for private school. It can be used for textbooks. It can be used for a wide range of education expenses. So what's your view on ESAs, and would you support the use of ESAs in the state of Colorado?
Absolutely, and we should actually make them even more accessible. We should allow individuals or even corporations to donate to ESAs and make them tax deductible. That way you can get, because oftentimes the funds through the public schools isn't sufficient enough. But we have to get much smarter about school choice in general. We have about 50% of our kids here in Colorado that graduate, our at-risk kids that graduate from a Colorado public high school, can't do college-level work after they graduate, which I think is actually probably the greatest crisis facing our state today. We're not teaching them the technical disciplines as well. We need to do a lot more on vocational training in our public high schools as well. So that's why I said earlier, the teachers union. When I was in the House of Representatives here in Colorado, I was on the House Ed Committee, and I watched firsthand the power and influence of the unions. And let me tell you, they're not providing much public good. I mean, they're really putting their own interests ahead of our kids, ahead of our parents, and they're really they're hurting the kids who are most at risk.
You're listening to the second Ready Colorado gubernatorial town hall we're doing every couple of weeks with leading Republican candidates. My guest this week is Victor Mitchell. You can learn more about Victor and his campaign at vic4gov.com. That's the number 4 in the middle there, VIC, the number 4gov.com to learn more about Victor. Let me just ask you to follow up a little bit. You anticipated a later question of mine, but could you elaborate a little bit more on your thoughts about technical education and the concept that seems to have been in America for quite a while that everybody should go to college?
That's actually not the case. I mean, we're having a tremendous shortage, even in our state, of skilled labor. I mean, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, mechanics, right down the list. And the misnomer is that our kids don't want to take up these technical fields. That's absolutely not true at all. At least that hasn't been my experience. We've been to 50 counties. We've done over 300 events all across our state. And what we're hearing constantly is we need to start teaching vocational trades directly in our public schools, but we also have to deal with the regulatory environment. We have apprenticeships that are 4 or 5 years long in order to get these kids ultimately through the system where they can actually earn a living, where they can actually stay in that trade. And it's too much to ask somebody to listen. You're going to work for 5 years or 4 years without making virtually any money at all. Where you can't even afford an apartment. That's not a workable model at all. Make no mistake about it, a lot of these regulations are chilling the amount of kids entering into these trades, keeping prices artificially high. So we have to do a lot more both in the regulatory scheme, but we also have to promote vocational training in our public schools. We also have to teach a great more about STEM and STEAM, science, technology, engineering, and math. These are really the disciplines that change people's lives. We have 3 to 5 times more technical jobs today in Colorado available than qualified kids graduating from a Colorado university. So we have to deal with that as well, most starting in our public schools right all the way through our public universities.
And we'll get to the higher education conversation in a little bit because I have a lot of questions in that area as well. Again, if you're joining us over the town hall phone lines and you want to ask a question of Victor Mitchell, hit *3 on your phone. And I would like to actually bring a caller on right now. And let's go to Yaron. Hey, Yaron, you are on with Ross Kaminsky and, more importantly, with Victor Mitchell. What's your question for Victor? Go ahead, Yaron. All right, we're going to...
He was on You're On 630, but then he went You're Off.
Yeah, right. I don't know what's happening here with the phones. We'll let some other folks kind of take that over, but I'll ask you the question that Yaron was going to ask. He says the state of Colorado has one of the lowest funding levels per pupil in terms of education in the country. Is that adequate? How do we fix it? And I guess I would ask, is it true? Because... as a data guy, there are a lot of different ways to represent data.
I don't believe that that's true, but I do believe we may have a funding shortage. The biggest issue is we're not paying our teachers enough money. I mean, that's really the bottom line, especially in rural parts of our state. We have too much money that's going into public schools, and it's basically a broken system. So about 20% of the funds go to fund para. There's many different bureaucracies and overhead that it goes to fund as well. So our teachers are getting the short end of the stick. I plan on doing a lot more to try to drive teacher wages in Colorado. It very well be we might have a shortage of funding, although I've never been a big believer that. I think the system is entirely broken. As an entrepreneur that has built many companies, very complex companies, I've learned you got to get the system right before you fully fund it. And the system is entirely broken. The unions have just an incredible amount of power and influence. The Democratic Party is completely indebted to the unions. They really can't do anything without the union support. It's a vicious cycle. So we have to fix that first. I mean, we have to figure out ways to come up with alternatives where discourage teachers from joining unions, existing members of the union to take on an alternative path, and then we can actually bring in the types of reforms. Once those reforms are implemented, then we can then look at the funding model.
So we're talking with Victor Mitchell in the second Ready Colorado gubernatorial town hall. You can watch this online at our Facebook page, facebook.com/630KHOW. We're doing Facebook Live. You can also go to khow.com/townhall, and it's got a link in there that will get you to a website where you can ask a question of Victor yourself. I want to ask you a question quickly for those of you joining us through the town hall phone lines, a quick poll question. Should the state start reporting school performance ratings in an easy-to-understand format like A through F or 1 through 5 stars? Press 1 for yes, 2 for no, or 3 if you are not sure. Victor, I want to follow up on your last answer, and I realize this may be a slightly treacherous question, but do you believe that public school teachers are overpaid, underpaid, or compensated on average about the right level?
That's a tough question because it's so much is based on seniority and tenure, which is a poor system. I mean, we need math teachers, especially early stage math teachers, which we're desperately short of, as well as science teachers across the state, should simply be paid more than other teachers that may be teaching social studies or English. That doesn't make them any less important. It just, in today's environment, we have a significant shortage of these technical type fields. So certainly we're paying too low of wages for starting teachers, largely because of the tenure issues. So we're rewarding teachers based on seniority of how long they've been there, as opposed to what they're teaching, how effective they are. That's a big issue. We need to start looking at pay for performance, giving teachers greater flexibility on the curriculum, and really measuring teachers. Your question, if I could answer your question before, is absolutely we should simplify the rating system. It should be A through F. It should be 1 through 10, a very simplified system where any student or family can look online and see legitimately without any puff as to what really is going on in their school district and how well their teachers are performing.
So that relates to my next question for you. There's been a pretty substantial backlash in the state of Colorado in the past few years, at least, about perceived over-testing in schools. And the state has substantially reduced testing in response to some of that. Do you believe that it is important to have a statewide test at least some grade levels across the state of Colorado?
I believe in once a year a state test, but that state test should be arbitrary. It should be unpredictable. You shouldn't be able to teach to the test. The teacher shouldn't know when it's going to be administered. The students should know when it's being administered. Most especially the management, the executives within the public school system shouldn't know. And it should be open book because that's how our economy works today. I mean, we're an open economy. So you need to have the foundational skills to solve a problem. If you want to solve, a Pythagorean theorem, you're gonna need. Oh, God, I forgot A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Maybe I can look that up very quickly, but I have the general sense of how to solve it. I mean, we have to teach more problem-solving skills, so we have to think about our testing differently. I'm terribly worried that we teach to the test, we get misleading and inaccurate results, and we have schools saying, "Oh, we're doing terrific," when many of their kids who are troubled kids or kids are at risk, they end up not going to. They've coordinated with the teachers, with the school administration, and said, you know what, I'm not going to show up that day. So we've got to be much smarter about this. There's too much energy and too much time focus. We should be able to look at any kid and say, listen, what do you really know, and where are really the deficiencies? So I think that should be done on an annualized basis, but in an unpredictable way.
Let me try again with the phone lines and bring a caller on with a question about education. Fingers crossed that we have Crystal. Hey, Crystal, are you with us?
I'm with you.
Excellent. All right. What's your question for gubernatorial candidate Victor Mitchell?
I'm just wondering if there's any way possible that there could be any state funding at all for homeschool parents, because what I'm finding, and especially in watching my daughter homeschool my grandchildren, is they are being trained up and according to the way they should go, and they are so amazingly smart. But she gets no extra funding that I know of, anyway, from the state at all.
Thank you, Crystal. Just in the interest of time, I've got your question. It's a great question. Let's hear Victor's answer.
Well, Crystal, it's nice to meet you. And absolutely, they should be getting funding for all types of homeschooling, online schooling, charter schooling. I'm a strong believer in vouchers. I'm a strong believer in education savings accounts. Absolutely. And your experience is actually a little bit similar to our family experience. Our son was a terrific student. Also, he was an elite athlete, and he left after his sophomore year of high school, and he went on to a school back in the Deep South, and the school was a public school, was absolutely terrible. So what did he do? He ended up taking a bunch of online courses. He was mostly homeschooled, and he ended up becoming a valedictorian. He's at West Point today. So absolutely, we've got to give parents and families much more flexibility and and access to public funds so they can pursue, what's best for their kids.
Thank you very much for that question, Crystal. Excellent question. Again, Victor and our special guest, Victor Mitchell, his website, vic4gov.com, vic4gov.com. Again, you've anticipated a couple of questions. Let's see if we can do this in about 2 minutes here, and then we'll hit a break. Number one, you mentioned tenure. So in 2010, Colorado made some modifications to the tenure rules. But in practice, it seems like it's still exceptionally difficult to remove tenure from a public school system, a government school system teacher. So what's your thought on tenure? And do you think teachers should have tenure at all? Do you think they should be able to get tenure but lose it easier? What are your thoughts on the issue?
I just don't see in a modern economy the purpose of tenure. I mean, I can tell you that our family was very important, our kids, to go to a faith-based school. So our kids went to a faith-based school. The way they do it with their teachers and their educators that work there, every year the teachers get a one-year contract. At the end of the 1 year, they are evaluated and they determine whether they're going to be rehired. 95% of the time, the teachers are rehired. I don't understand that concept at all, that we have to provide tenure. It doesn't work like that in the private sector. It shouldn't work that way in the public sector. I mean, teachers should have to justify their capabilities. I've been a teacher. I've taught at 2 major state universities. As an adjunct professor last year up at CSU. I served on a board, an advisory board for a major state university as well. I mean, you don't get tenure as an adjunct professor.
Right.
I mean, and I wouldn't want it anyway. I mean, it just seems like it's going to protect mediocrity, and we don't want that. We've got to have reforms. We are competing against countries today that don't have any of this nonsensical rules that are protecting, putting a bureaucracy ahead of kids and parents. And we've got to get much smarter. I mean, we have low unemployment in Colorado, but we have poor earning power, and our kids are graduating from schools with not relevant degrees. So many kids are graduating from high schools that can't do college level work. As I said earlier, 50% of our at-risk kids. I mean, we have to start taking on some of these issues in a different way and having a different approach.
But there is, I gather, a little theme in a couple of your answers to a couple of questions, a theme that I agree with. The tenure thing, and then you were also talking about apprenticeships when it relates to vocational education, technical education. Both of those are systems that are in place to protect the incumbents, to protect competition, and to protect the mediocre, I think, all too frequently. So I agree with you on that. Let me ask you a question. I'll ask you to give me a fairly short answer on this, and then we're going to hit just a 90-second break and come back and talk about higher education. In Colorado right now, these taxpayer-funded school districts take union dues out of teachers' paychecks and hand the money over to the unions, who typically turn around and spend a decent chunk of it on political campaigns.
Yes, they do.
And I'm certain they won't be funding you with that money. Do you think Colorado Public Schools should be performing this service for unions?
Well, I am definitely enemy number one to the teachers' unions, that's for sure. They don't like me at all. And they didn't like me when I was in the House Ed Committee. When I watched them, the unions would actually give cards to the members of the committee so they would parrot the same talking points of the union. But to answer your question, no, of course not. Of course not. Those dues should be paid directly to the union. There shouldn't be an intermediary. We shouldn't make it easy to join the union. It should be like any other union, like a private union. It should be optional. It should be we're a right to work state. We should be a right to work state.
We should be. Yeah,
in every aspect.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I mean, this is ridiculous. Another mechanism for the unions to kind of run roughshod and to protect mediocrity and not put our kids and our parents first. And really, what's the end result is we're educating kids with not the relevant skills they need to compete in a modern economy, which is really a great cause of our political discourse.
So we're going to hit a quick break here in our second Ready Colorado sponsored gubernatorial town hall that we are doing with leading Republican candidates. My guest this evening, Victor Mitchell. If you are listening through the town hall dial-in, hit *3 to ask a question. When we come back, we're going to talk some higher ed, and then we're going to move on to a range of topics from everything from para to right to work, as we talked about, to healthcare, to infrastructure, all kinds of things. We're going to do all of these things with Victor Mitchell. One more just quick thing. I want to give you the poll question again, and then when we come back, I'll give you the results to what you have given us on the poll question. Should the state start reporting school performance ratings in an easy-to-understand format like A through F or 1 through 5 stars? Hit 1 on your phone for yes, hit 2 on your phone for no, hit 3 on your phone if you're not sure. We will be right back with Victor Mitchell.